Donald Trump says that he can fix this in 24 hours.
Mm.
And so what we all interpret that meaning is that he would grab Zelensky and twist his arm and say, "You cut a deal with Putin right now. You're not going to get anything from us unless you cut a deal." And of course, given the relationship between Putin and Trump, the relationship will certainly uh, weigh in favor of the Russians in terms of whatever deal is struck. And I think part of what Biden is doing now is saying, we have got to get you strong enough, not just on the battlefield, but in your own defense industry, so that you're not dependent on us and others for ammunition and things like that you need every day. So we're going to try to ease that dependence so that if Trump is elected, they're not going to be tied to the whims of Donald Trump.
Well, what do you make of the fact that President Zelensky is there in Washington? He's arrived tonight, a whole series of high profile meetings, and that very passionate appeal for more support that we heard there.
Well, I think it kind of shows the tight situation that we're in and he's in that it was a quick trip. It was something that was a bit of a surprise to everyone, but it shows that he needed to get here. And I think the president really urged him to come to help him deal with the Congress so that the Congress can understand, the House particularly, what's at stake. And Zelensky's got a very charismatic personality, and I think if he can't do it, I'm not sure who else can do it. But we're hoping in the next couple of days in these meetings he can bring along enough Republicans so that this package can be released.
Yeah, because just to remind people listening, I mean, there's this huge package of support for Ukraine, but it has been blocked. And essentially, leading Republicans are tying it up to a whole host of their other priorities slightly closer to home, saying they want more money for the US southern border with Mexico and so on. And they've been holding up this next tranche of vital military supplies for many weeks now.
That's right. It's gotten pulled into our politics here, which is not surprising, but unfortunately, our politics is so polarized as we get into the presidential campaign season. And the lead, the leaders of this group that is holding it back are MAGA Republicans. They are Trumpier than Trump, if you will, and they're tying, as you mentioned, they're tying some very important issues to them, which is our southern border, and that's a story in and of itself, which we don't have time for here. But it is a part of a culture war. It's part of a campaign that the Republicans are going to run that says, "Look at Biden; he cares more about sending money to Ukraine than about our own national security and with the southern border." And so that's what this is all about. It's not even like the Republicans don't like Ukraine. It's a matter of they don't like Biden, and they're going to use the Ukraine situation to try to make him look bad.
And President Zelensky was due to deliver an address remotely to those Republican senators last week, but that was cancelled at the last minute. Presumably, he's hoping that by appearing in person, he can win them over.
Well, that's exactly right. And I think part of his pitch is going to have to be that he realizes that things aren't going well in Washington, number one. And number two, that he knows that his role in this is to convince the House that this stalemate, if you will, in the South and Ukraine of this offensive, that there's going to be another plan, that he's working with the U.S. military authorities, that they're going to fix this, and that this money isn't going to be frittered away on a losing proposition. And so that's really what he's got to convince these House Republicans is that, look, this is a good investment, not only because of the strategic aspect of this, a geopolitical aspect of this for the United States, but that we are going to win, and I need your help to do this, and we're revising the plan.
It's becoming harder, though, isn't it, for President Zelensky to make that argument? I remember there was a huge amount of expectation of that renewed offensive from Ukrainian forces earlier this year. And yes, they did take some territory, but Ukraine hasn't managed to really remove Russian forces from that great swathe of territory down the east of the country. There appears to be a bit of a stalemate there, doesn't there?
Well, I mean, that's right. And frankly, I think there was some exaggerated expectations among all of us in the West who were expecting to see something like we saw last summer. If you remember, they took Kharkiv and a lot of the area up there in the north in this lightning strike that everyone loved and said, okay, let's do it again in the south. But they waited a long time, and part of that was the West, the U.S., and others saying, let's get you trained up to fight like we do in the West. And by the time that was done, the Russians had dug in deeply and much deeper than we expected. And so you're right, it is now at a stalemate, and that's what's going to have to change. And Zelensky is going to have to win over and convince these Republicans that he realizes that and that he's going to make some changes. And he's going to have to tell them what some of those changes are. I don't think he can just say it. And I'm not sure how ready he is to give some detail. And I'm not sure he really wants to give detail to these guys who will go around and talk to the TV cameras afterwards. So this is a tricky visit that he's making here. It's a bit of a Hail Mary, as we say in the football language here in the U.S., where he's going to throw a forward pass, and hopefully there's going to be someone on the other side to catch it.
Yeah, and President Biden has continued to sound very, very supportive, and he does want this package of aid to go through. Um, but of course, we've got that presidential election coming up next year, which you referred to. And Donald Trump has already made it clear that he's far from certain that he wants to just continue pouring money into this.
Well, Donald Trump says that he can fix this in 24 hours.
Mm.
What we all interpret that meaning is that he would grab Zelensky and twist his arm and say, "You cut a deal with Putin right now. You're not going to get anything from us unless you cut a deal." And of course, given the relationship between Putin and Trump, the relationship will certainly uh, weigh in favor of the Russians in terms of whatever deal is struck. And I think part of what Biden is doing now is saying, we have got to get you strong enough, not just on the battlefield, but in your own defense industry, so that you're not dependent on us and others for ammunition and things like that you need every day. So we're going to try to ease that dependence so that if Trump is elected, they're not going to be tied to the whims of Donald Trump.